It looks like we've already got a few people in here. So welcome everyone. I'm excited to have you here with us this morning. We are gonna get started with our agenda here. So we'll kick off with some introductions and some framing. I'll talk a little bit about our why and theory of change here at Teach for America. And then we will hear from our wonderful alumni, Kevin, and have some time for questions and answers with him. So just to kick us off, I'll start with introductions. My name is Hannah Downing. I am a recruitment director on Teach for America's recruitment team. I've been on staff for a little over 5 years now. A 2010 Jacksonville Corps member. I taught 6th grade English in the Corps and then stayed in the classroom for 3 years after my 2-year commitment. So I taught for 5 years. And now I live in Lexington, Kentucky, where, like I said, I work on Teach for America staff. I'm going to pass it to Molly.
Hey everybody, I'm Molly, and I live just down the road from Hannah in Lexington, Kentucky as well. I did the Corps in Chicago in 2012, where I taught high school algebra mostly, taught some other classes too. I taught for a total of 5 years between Chicago Public Schools and in Blacksburg, Virginia too. So I've taught everything from 3rd grade to 12th grade, every course level, rural schools, urban schools, traditional schools, charter schools. And over those 7 years, it's a privilege to now get to bring in other people and have them consider doing the Corps as well.
Thanks, Molly. Would love to hear from you all, if you don't mind giving us a and just kind of say your name, maybe what you're studying and why you're here today.
Sure, I'd be happy to go.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Catherine Berkey. I'm a senior music and English major, and I'm interested in Teach for America because it's kind of a crazy time, but teaching has always been something that I have kept as an option and been thinking about, and so I figured something like Teach for America would be a good way to maybe get into that and see if it really interested me.
Great, thanks, Nancy.
Hi everybody, I'm Catherine. I'll be turning on my camera shortly. I am a sociology major and I am thinking about Teach for America as a possible option as well.
Thanks, Catherine.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm a freshman and I'm thinking of majoring in psychology, and yeah.
Thanks, Kristen. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Evan Adams and I am a recruitment manager with Teach for America located in Lexington, Kentucky. I graduated from the University of Kentucky after growing up in Lexington, and I did my 2 years in the Corps in Southeast Kentucky in a little town called Whitesburg as part of the Appalachia Corps.
Thanks, Evan. And Kevin, we're gonna highlight you later, but if you want to give us a quick intro, you are welcome to do that now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Havelda. I am a Center graduate. I graduated in 2008. I did a double major in English and International Studies. I was a Bonner Scholar alum, and I joined the Corps right after graduation, taught in New Orleans for 2 years post-Katrina, and then moved up to New York and taught for another 2 years. And now I am an attorney, went to law school at UK, and I'm actually practicing out here in Denver. But I'll be happy to answer more questions, sort of give you my spiel a little bit later. But I was in your shoes not that long ago.
Thanks, Kevin. Excited to have such a strong Kentucky presence on the call today. Feel right at home with all of you. So thanks so much for being here, and hopefully we can get to know each other a bit more and help you all learn more about Teach for America over the next hour or so. Yep, I totally forgot I had this slide. This is lovely pictures of Molly and myself for your enjoyment. And now we're gonna move right along. All right. So in our country today, less than 10% of the 15.5 million kids growing up in poverty will graduate from college by the age of 25. This issue disproportionately impacts children of color who are more than 2 times as likely to be born into poverty, who bear the additional burden of low expectations and other biases stemming from institutionalized racism. We at Teach for America believe this is one of our nation's greatest injustices. And we also believe that this is a solvable problem and that the future of our country actually depends on our ability to fix it. I'll give you a moment to read some of the facts on the slide that demonstrate the inequities that exist in our country today. So Teach for America is a national nonprofit leadership development organization that enlists our nation's top leaders to work toward a common goal of ending educational inequity. We know that potential is equally distributed across lines of difference, but opportunity is not. Our approach to the problem is two-pronged. In the short term, we aim to develop our nation's most promising leaders through a 2-year teaching commitment in a low-income school. Through this teaching commitment, our core members are able to develop as leaders and are able to deepen their understanding of the issue, as well as have a profound impact on their communities. We ensure our core members are ready to lead their classrooms through an intensive 5 to 7 week summer training program, as well as ongoing coaching and professional development. And then in the long term, after their 2 years in the classroom, our alumni network of more than 56,000 leaders continue to dismantle inequity at the systems level through their collective leadership across all sectors, working to achieve the ultimate goal of educational equity for all. I'll give you a second to read this quote from our founder, Wendy Cobb. I think this quote really encompasses Teach for America's theory of change. We know that this problem is not just about teachers. It doesn't only exist in the 4 walls of school buildings or of classrooms. Teachers didn't create this problem. They didn't create educational inequity, and they certainly cannot solve this problem on their own. We know that this is going to take a diverse coalition of leaders working across all sectors at every level of the system if we are going to truly impact the change that will be required to solve this problem. So it is a 2-year commitment, but it's also a lifelong commitment to equity and systems change. Like I said, we have over 65,000 alumni all over the world. About a third of our alums will stay in the classroom or in the education system and affect change from there, while the other 2/3 are doing anything and everything you can imagine. We have 52 alumni on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, over 205 elected officials, over 700 policy and advocacy organizing leaders, and hundreds of alum that go into the healthcare field. So this is just a snapshot of some of the incredible fields that our alumni go into. And we are going to have the opportunity today to hear from one of our alums. Like I said, Kevin is going to have the opportunity to come off mute and share a bit about his story and how Teach for America impacted his career trajectory and what he's doing with the lessons that he learned during his classroom commitment in his role today as an attorney. And then we will turn it over to all of you to ask questions of Kevin or of me, Molly, and Evan, and more about like logistics on the Teach for America front, whatever is top of mind for you all. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Kevin, to give us a more robust introduction and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you for that, Hannah. I wasn't aware there was going to be art associated with this PowerPoint, so I appreciate that. Now I get to kind of stare at myself and look at little screens of you all. So as I mentioned, I'm a Center alum. I'm also a TFA alum, so I'm sort of the bridge between these two programs here today. So I thought it was sort of, to the extent you may find it helpful to hear my insights, I'm going to share sort of my path a little bit and where I am now and how I got here, and sort of the role that TFA has played in that trajectory. I'm not going to speak on behalf of your all's experience. This year has been unlike any other in history. So first and foremost, I have to say I'm sorry that your experience at Center has probably been very different this year from what I experienced when I was there. I can share a little bit of maybe some of your feelings though. And the feeling is this: in my junior and senior year, I had all this great preparation. I had a lot of experiential learning. I studied abroad twice. I went to Strasbourg and also a semester abroad in India during Center term. I had great life experiences. I was involved with the Bonner Scholars Program, so I was committed to service. I had great English teachers, but also great religion teachers who really challenged my perspective on the world and what it means to be a world citizen and to give. And so kind of charged with all this ambition and all this drive to make the world a better place, you're left at your junior, senior year with this immense charge of what do I do with it? Sort of the natural progression for a lot of students would be law school or med school or some sort of grad school, because you can't wait to get to that next spot. There's a very next thing that comes after a Center, and you have to get there quickly. A TFA recruiter came to campus during my junior year, and I didn't know what Teach for America was at the time, so it was sort of an introductory session to TFA, kind of similar to this. And during that presentation, they shared an article with us, which I'd read before, and it was a study that had been done in the state of Louisiana, where they had used the failing test scores of fifth graders in New Orleans in order to figure out how to allocate the amount of prison beds that they are going to need in the upcoming budgeting cycles in the legislature. So to sort of peel that back a little bit, they were using the failing test scores of 10-year-olds to determine how many people were going to be in prison in a given year. And so at that moment, I figured that that's not right. And I can do something about that. And I was very inspired. And so I really appreciate Hannah's presentation, because it started with the why. Why TFA is here, why it's still doing what it does. And I think the most important question that's going to face you as you sort of think about what to do next after Center, the most important question you need to ask yourself is why. Why am I going to do something? And then the what and the how will follow after that. So I made a very conscious decision after graduating from Center that my first professional job was going to be to try to put some good out into the world. It was ambitious, it was naive, but that's what I was going to do. So I signed up and I joined the TFA Corps for New Orleans. I spent 2 very, very challenging years teaching in the Recovery School District in New Orleans, which is a school district that was formed post Katrina in some of the worst schools in our country. My first year teaching, I was at an alternative high school of that Recovery School District. So to put that in perspective, I was teaching kids that got kicked out of the worst schools of the worst schools of the worst schools in our country. In my first year teaching, 2 of my children were shot and killed within 2 weeks of one another. This is not sort of symbolic of every experience that people have in the Corps, but it was mine, and it definitely shaped my outlook on both teaching and the dire consequence of what role I played in this larger system. After 2 years, I had gotten into law school at UK, which was always sort of my plan, but I had this itch that I wasn't quite done yet, and I thought I was just starting to get good at being a teacher. So as luck would have it, I was approached by a guy that was forming a school in Brooklyn, New York, or was starting a school, and asked me to be one of its founding teachers. And so I deferred law school for another 2 years and went and lived in Brooklyn, New York for 2 years and helped start a school from the ground up, which were probably 2 of the most rewarding years of my entire life. Starting something from the ground up was just phenomenally rewarding. It was extremely challenging. I got no sleep, had no friends, no social life, but it was worth it. So after that, sort of armed with that sort of life experience, I went back to law school. But the difference being is that I was 26 and I had lived more in those 4 years than most people do an entire lifetime. I had seen more. I had more professional development under my belt. I had the command of 90 children and students, under me every single day. And not only that, but I was tasked with preparing them and also educating them, and their success was largely tied to my own. Meaning, on the flip side, their failure was inexorably linked with my own. And knowing what I knew from my first year about those students that didn't make it, I knew that the stakes were as high as they came. So whether you pursue an education career after the core or whatever you do after the core, that experience has armed me with an absolutely amazing and phenomenal perspective to have, and that how you approach your work, whatever it is, understand the stakes, understand your measure of responsibility in that profession, and also understand that you have the ability to shape the outcome of not only your own trajectory, but the trajectories of many other people for whom you're responsible. And to kind of give you a little bit more of a background into that, when I went to law school, I still had this education itch. So when I graduated, I joined a law firm. It's a multi-state law firm, but I was based in Lexington, Kentucky. And one of the things I got to work on, Kentucky was at the time contemplating passing its very first charter school legislation. Well, I'd worked in both public and charter schools, and I actually had some pretty unique insights. And not a single member, not a single member in the General Assembly in Kentucky at the time had taught in a charter school. And they were passing laws that were going to impact students' lives and learning for the years to come. And so I got to work with the General Assembly in helping to craft legislation that was more closely aligned with Kentucky's constitution, but also more aligned with what would actually work for students in Kentucky. And so that was a phenomenally rewarding experience. After that, I went on to work for a federal judge, and my insights that I gleaned from teaching also carried over to that experience when I was clerking. The judge for whom I worked was a phenomenal public servant, but during sentencing, especially, she would ask me certain questions about someone's background, and I get to look at the person's sentencing recommendations, and I'd get to see sort of where some of the disparities in their education and sort of their socioeconomic backgrounds that's where I would be plugged in as a teacher, and I could share some insights to the extent they were helpful to a person's even sentencing. So just the perspective that I had as a teacher carries on to sort of all aspects of my career. And now I'm working at a law firm here in Denver. I continue to take on pro bono cases. I continue to argue for the things that matter, and I'm a lifelong advocate. All of this was shaped by my experience in the Corps. And all of it was made better because I was a Corps member. So I really can't say in words how much I support this program and what it's trying to do, what it did for me. I'm not unique in that regard. All my friends that were my colleagues and cohorts in my Corps experience have all gone on to do tremendous things. They're leading schools. They're physicians leading their practice. They're lawyers. They're phenomenal people that have this shared vision of what it means to achieve opportunity for every young person in this country. And I think even now, as you guys are approaching graduation and approaching your junior and senior year, there's no more important time to add to that discourse, especially going through what our country's going through now. And there's no more positive way you can add to that conversation than by leading a classroom and charging the next generation of youth to see that the world can be an even better place than it is right now. So I remain optimistic about our world. I remain optimistic about our youth because of my experiences in the classroom, despite what we've had. And it also energizes me to continue doing and to continue to approach every single day at my work with optimism and with some hope, and knowing that my contribution is not done, but also is very important. That's sort of my soapbox. As a center alum, I think that it also sort of, it speaks to what the school has prepared you for and what it's preparing you for. And so I can't think of a better way to sort of exercise all the talents and all the lessons that you learn both in and outside the classroom in one of the most immediately rewarding ways to people that really need you to share your talents. I'm going to shut up for now because I could probably go on for another hour talking about, you know, what this means to me personally. But I really would like to hear some of your questions and some of your thoughts about, you know, what are you thinking about? Like, you know, how did this affect you? Or, you know, if there's questions for Molly and Hannah and Evan, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them as well. So I'm going to mute myself until someone pipes up.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen too, so that you don't have to look at your picture while we're all talking. So I'll do that now. And yeah, if anybody has questions, we still have plenty of time. So would love to hear from you all.
I do. I have a question. So you mentioned that, you know, you had a more difficult experience in the beginning in New Orleans, and I wonder what tools Teach for America gave you as a teacher that, I don't know your background, if you took education classes at Center or if you were prepared to be in the classroom prior to Teach for America. So I just want to know what type of tools and support you were given as you were in the classroom in New Orleans post-Katrina.
That's a great question. I'll speak to what tools I was given, and then I'm sure that Hannah and Molly and Evan will speak to more of the tools that are provided now, you know, not in the distant future or distant past rather. So when I was in New Orleans, like a lot of my core members, I had no formal education background. That is a large critique of some of the program, to be sure. So I approached it. I do come from a family of a lot of teachers. And so my older sister in particular would make sure that my dosage of humble pie was a large one each and every morning. As far as what TFA did to prepare us, we had essentially what we referred to as a boot camp prior to going to New Orleans, where it's a five week, very, very intensive training period where we're sort of on site. And we're getting very rigorous instruction about understanding by design, data-driven discovery, or data-driven education, sort of the tools to equip us. Again, it was a crash course, and you can't compress an entire 4 years of education background and master's work into a 5-week course. I think everyone understood and appreciated that. So while we were in the Corps, we were assigned a professional mentor from Teach for America who would check in with us, go over lesson plans, go over assessments, sort of be that sort of wide angle lens to see how it's going. They're constantly in our classroom, giving us feedback, giving us mentorship. We had professional development sessions every other week. And then when I was in New York, which wasn't exactly my core commitment, but I was in the same sort of program with a lot of core members at the time. That's when I pursued a master's, and I got a master's in education at that time. It was a learning by fire experience, to be sure, and to be very candid. I think every teacher, no matter how many years of background they've had as far as training and preparation, your first year of teaching is your gauntlet, and there's nothing that can really prepare you for it. I do credit TFA for having incredible resources and just incredible veteran teachers at your disposal as well, to sort of get some advice and getting some insights from them along the way. But to make no mistake about it, your first year teaching is learned by doing, and it's just a baptism by absolute scalding fire.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna piggyback on a lot of what Kevin said. I think he really hit the nail on the head with, like, I've talked to people who came from non-traditional backgrounds, people who studied political science, or like me, I studied journalism in undergrad, and then folks who went through a traditional education program and joined the Corps, people who went through a traditional education program and entered the classroom in a traditional way. And no matter who I talk to, the first year in the classroom you cannot possibly be fully prepared for what you're going to encounter in that year. And I think, you know, another thing that's also true is like when it's the first day of school, whether you've been teaching for 1 year or for 10 years or for 30 years, every year the kids walking through that door, it's a new set of kids, it's a new set of challenges. You don't know, you know, where they might be academically or what they might be experiencing at home. And so while the first year of teaching is really challenging, every year when you're teaching is challenging, and every year is an opportunity to learn and grow and try new things and innovate and be the best teacher that you can be for your students. And I think that's what's so exciting about this opportunity is that you have new opportunities every year when you're teaching to interact with a new set of students and to really engage with them and be the leader that they need and deserve.
And if I can just add one thing, those are the resources that TFA provides. There's no substitute, in my opinion, from finding a veteran teacher at your school, whether they're a TFA or not, and just sucking all the knowledge you can out of them, shadowing them, sitting in on their classrooms, seeing how they ran their classroom, what systems they had, how they interacted with various students and what worked for them. There's no substitute for that. Every school where I was, there was some sort of veteran teacher, and I just spent every second that I could observing and gleaning as much as I could from them. And I think that's a trait that's transferable to any profession. As an attorney, I want to be paired with a very senior attorney so I can see how she does business, and I can see how she handles a client call, how she comports herself in court. That's just invaluable tutelage that you learn as someone that's learning a new field. That's what you do. You look for the masters, and then you figure that out. And the one other preachy moment I'll say that's always kind of carried with me is that my dad taught me, I was a soccer player, and he always said it was because I was pissed off that this kid on my team made captain over me when I was like 8, and I was really mad about it, and I didn't like this kid. And he said, Kevin, those who truly seek excellence are never threatened by it when they see it in others, rather they are excited. So I think the last point I'll make on that, and finding sort of mentor teachers in any field really, is that once you recognize someone's really good at what they do, you should be trying to figure out everything about how they do what they do and learn from it and build it into your own practice. And teaching is just so important to learn that quickly.
I have a follow-up question, not necessarily related to my first one, but I'm a Bonner, so it's pretty cool that you were a Bonner. But I went to middle school where it was a charter school, and most of my teachers were Teach for America teachers. Actually, all of them are Teach for America teachers, and they were great teachers. But the school was not. So I just want to know about the placement. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. And I want to know about the placement of schools and how much choice you have if you get to that point, because I would be considering coming back to Nashville, but I don't know if I'd want to teach in a charter school personally. And I know that the public school system would probably have different challenges. That's why I asked about the resources. But yeah, I just want to know how much choice you have in placement.
I don't know if you want me to take that one, or Hannah. I think you're probably more apt to, because my experience is a little dated. I mean, I can definitely speak to that. And just so you know, just real quick, that I'm trying to point to it. That right there is my Bonner Scholars plaque in the background that hangs, so that everyone that has a Zoom call with me looks at that. Right above it, you can't really see, is my TFA plaque. So I do think it's not just product placement for this call. It's like just it's kind of how I roll. So I'll let Hannah take that one, but then I can speak to you about the differences between the two, because it's a very good point and a really good concern.
Take this question, Catherine. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So are you asking, like, do you have control over your placement for like region and subject? Do you have your control of your placement as far as like which school you work in? Could you just
both?
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So the answer to that question is yes. You, as part of our application process, you would fill out an assignment preferencing form. And this form would basically allow you to rank your choices for region, subject, and grade level. I think I heard you say you were from Nashville. So if Nashville, we have a region in Nashville, which I think you know that, but if that's like your first choice, then you would obviously put that at the top of your list. If there's other regions that you would be excited about, obviously you would add those to your list as well. And then you do the same thing with subject and grade level. Like, I really want to teach high school. I really don't want to teach middle school. I really would be excited to teach science, would really be horrified to teach English, whatever those individualized preferences are for you. And then we look at your preferences, and by we, I mean a complicated computer algorithm looks at your preferences, looks at the needs of each of the regions where we place our core members, and we also look at your transcripts. So we kind of see, like, based on your transcripts, based on the courses that you've taken, would we be able to place you in this region teaching this subject in this grade level? Different states have many different criteria as to what is required for teachers. You'll learn through the process that some states require you to get a master's degree while you're teaching in order to be certified. Others don't. It's very individualized. So you have a lot of control over where and what you teach, because you do fill out that form. And then when, if and when you receive an offer to join the Corps, we say, congratulations, you've been, we're offering you a position in Nashville teaching middle school science. And then you can say, like, yes, I want to do that, or you always have the option of declining your offer as well. And then once you're actually in the region, assigned to your region, the region itself will set you up with job interviews at different schools. So that's where you have a little bit less control, because we are trying to place a large volume of Corps members in schools. So we very much encourage people not to be picky as to where they're working, because if we're putting you at a school to interview for that job, it's because that school needs someone like you to be teaching in their building. So those students need someone like you to be their teacher. And our first priority is to just get people in classrooms. So it's kind of a twofold answer. Yes, you have control over where and what, but less control over the actual physical building where you're teaching. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that from my experience, and this may not be the best approach as far as choosing your region, but this was my thought process. I'm 22. I've lived in Kentucky my whole life, other than the study abroad experiences. And by the way, I never thought I was actually going to go to Center when I was a Kentucky resident pre-undergrad, and then fell in love with the school and got recruited to play soccer there, et cetera. So I was ready to kind of get out and see the world and do other things. So the way that I triaged my regions was I decided that these 5 cities in the United States are places where I wanted to live while I was young. Everywhere else was least preferred. And so I knew that New Orleans is sort of my calling based on the article that I'd read. And I always loved New Orleans, and I felt like that was some place where I wanted to be. I also thought Chicago was a cool place, New York, DC, San Francisco, or Denver. And over the course of my life, I've happened to live in basically 3 of those 5 places anyway. But that was sort of my calculus. And I think that year there was the greatest need for New Orleans. So we had a huge core that year. There was 275 of us in just my year alone. As far as the school placements were concerned, it's very much what Hannah was explaining. There was a mass algorithm to which we weren't really privy while we were going through Institute, which is that boot camp that I was discussing, but they had lined up interviews for various people based on, X number of factors. So when the alternative school came in, their interview was insane. They were interviewing 2 of us. There were 2 representatives interviewing 2 of us in the same room at the same time, and they were speaking back and forth to each other in Cajun and sort of a myriad of English and Creole Cajun mix, right? So they were talking to each other about the candidates in the room, and it was the most unorthodox interview I'd ever done. And on the fly, my interviewer asked me to just throw up a lesson. And so I did. And he said, the lesson was essentially, why should we listen to you? And where the students go. And so I just did off the cuff, and then he hired me on the spot. So I think to the extent the matchmaking is done, you kind of have to trust that they know the process and they know that what you may be good at. And I had a friend ask me sort of halfway through the year when I wouldn't say I was miserable, but it was, again, that was the hardest 6 months of probably my adult life, trying to figure out how to do this job and just getting owned every day. And just it was just really, really hard. And so my friend, who is at sort of an easier placement in rural Louisiana, she said, my experience is so good. Like, I feel like, everything's going according to plan. Like, why would you sign up for what you did? And my response to her, and I stay true to this, is that I feel like that's what we all signed up for in a way. And, we went where they needed teachers and where they needed people that were really going to care and really show up every single day. And, if we have to work weekends, we work weekends. But my job was to get those students closer to getting to have the future of their choosing, whether that be college, whether that be something else. But I wanted them to get closer and closer. And so that came with an incredible amount of hard work and incredible challenges. But if I didn't show up, there's no guarantee that someone else is gonna. And so I was in an alternative school, and that, again, like I said, has shaped a lot of my outlook on a lot of other things. And I don't regret it for a second. I mean, it was hard. There were times when the administration of the school, not TFA, but the administration of the school, completely had just abandoned its teachers and just told us, that they were feeding us to the wolves, and they wouldn't support us, and they wouldn't support our interventions. They wouldn't support me assigning homework on a Friday night. They wouldn't support that. I mean, just you run down the list, they wouldn't support me. But back to sort of a Doug Lemov type theory, and you'll learn who that person is sort of later on. But my classroom had to be my castle and my fortress. And whatever else happened around the school, I just couldn't be concerned with as much, because what I could control was those 90 minutes within my classroom where I had those students' attention, and that nothing else could matter within that 90 minutes. It just couldn't. So I don't know if that's sort of a rant about what school choice, but that sort of had to be my approach.
Thank you so much. I think I might have to go soon, but I appreciate everybody's answers. Those are my most pressing questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Well, thank you for your questions. I appreciate them. I appreciate you being a Bonner Scholar too. Hope she got that last part.
I also have a question. So I know that it's only a 2-year placement. So I was wondering if there have been any studies in the few decades that Teach for America has been around on the long-term benefit of Teach for America on underserved school systems, since teachers only have 2 years in a given school system that their actual placement is, whether or not they end up staying in that school system. Which is kind of a complex question, I know.
That is a complex question. I feel like we definitely have data about that, but I need to, I see Molly doing some searching in the background, so she's probably trying to find the exact numbers for you.
I've got numbers for you.
Okay, go Kevin.
They were, these numbers are very near and dear to my heart. And this is not, and I have to apologize that these are not the numbers that are representative of your direct question. Your questions, I understood it, are what are the long-term benefits to a 2-year placement for TFA teachers, I guess presupposing that they may not teach after that second year commitment, and what are the long-term impacts, benefits, et cetera. It's a very appropriate question. And one of the greatest criticisms that I hear, which again, I think comes from a well-founded place, as someone that's very, very tethered to a data-driven discussion of anything. You measure results by numbers and data. You just have to. It has to be your starting point as an attorney, as a teacher, as anything. And so what are our results? I think at your core. I can speak to the results of my network, my charter school network, when I was teaching in Brooklyn, because I think these also sort of peel back that onion layer. Uncommon Schools is comprised of, I would say, 70 to 80% of TFA placement folks that either stay or they were placed there originally. Uncommon Schools began as a charter school network just in the Northeast that decided it was going to do it right. and they cooked with the right medicine, and I could get all preachy about that, but essentially their approach was this. They were going to offer a free school to students that needed it the most in deserving backgrounds, and they were going to have a slice of public funding, and they were going to raise the rest on their own, which they wouldn't charge students a penny, and they were going to figure out exactly where students were as they came in their doors in 5th grade, measure them throughout, you know, their stay, and their goal was to get every single one, or to get 90% of their students to and through a 4-year college. Okay, so this was a bold experiment. In Uncommon's history, the first graduating class, so the class that they took as 5th graders, came from all over the city from various schools. Okay, so they took their math scores and their reading level scores at point of entry at 5th grade level. Okay, which were on average at a 2nd to 1st grade reading level by the time they got to them in 5th grade. Okay, these students were also what's called a 90-90-90. So it was 90% was their goal to get them to and through college, 90% were on a free and reduced lunch income basis, and 90% were students of color. Okay, so those are the 3 90s that were important to Uncommon's calculus to determine whether it had made an impact on this community. When those 5th graders graduated or were high school seniors for the first graduating class, they had 100% graduation rate. They had 100% going to college at that point. And by the time they were, I think in their fall semester of their senior year, they had racked up over $5.4 million in scholarships to 4-year institutions. Their attrition rate was lower than 80%, meaning that the students that started with them from 5th grade to graduation, less than 30% or 20% or so had left the school for various reasons. So those numbers are better than any school that I've seen in Kentucky, private or other. And so just that extrapolation of that program gives me the belief that it can work. And I juxtapose that experience along with the experience that I had in my first year teaching of students that were shot and killed. One, Shaka Miller, was 12 years old. Another, Anthony Williams, was 18 years old, and he couldn't read or write his first name. Those students represent a failure of education. It's a failure of us as a society to place importance on it. It's a failure of money. It's a failure of everything. But I look contrasting that with the experience of Uncommon Schools that largely takes students from the same socioeconomic background and that encounter very similar challenges in their community, and they reverse those odds. They say, instead of taking a 12-year-old that is more likely to be shot and killed by gang violence or by a shootout with the cops in the case of Anthony Williams, we're going to put them in a program that sets them up on a trajectory that literally changes their life. And that's why I drank the Kool-Aid, is because I see the measure, and not only do I see the data that supports that endeavor, but I also see what the data means on a personal level. So I can't speak to TFA's 2-year commitment, but I know from my own life experience and from teaching in this system at Uncommon Schools, it works. I have students still message me. They found me on Facebook and they found me on Instagram, and they message me. They see that I have a kid now. They like that. But my students are in good places, and I'm not saying it's because of me. I'd never be so audacious as to say that, but I'd like to think that I had some impact on my students' lives such that I enhanced the quality of their education so that they could benefit from the lessons that we did and the structures that we put in place. That's a long-winded answer to a very simple question. I'm sorry, but that's the best I got.
So I did a little research too, Nancy, while Kevin was sharing his personal reflections on the question. That first document that I shared there is an external facing compilation of a bunch of very academic resources, published peer-reviewed papers on the efficacy of Teach for America teachers after the 2-year core experience. I think too, the 4 of us here, we all stayed in the field beyond the commitment too, and I think that speaks to the fact that a lot of people do. One of the more interesting things I found while reading this was that our Latinx core members tend to stay the longest in the profession. Didn't know that until right now. Thought that was interesting. And I'm thinking right now about why that is, or what structures are in place that we see that spike in the data from the Latinx community in our core and in our network. But you can feel free to dig around some of those. This one is, it's all peer reviews from outside of our organization, external sources. So it should reflect the least amount of bias, I assume. And it looks pretty meaty, but you're obviously a center student, so you're really smart and driven, and not unafraid of not afraid of a dense academic reading assignment.
Thank you so much for those answers. Yeah, I just wasn't super familiar. I was lucky enough to grow up going to schools that had teachers that were there for a really long time and had a reputation and had really left an impact on the school by the time I got there. And so I just was not entirely familiar with short-term teaching or Teach for America in general. But I think that is the only question I had.
I know you've heard a lot from me, but I think the last sort of part of that I'll share, and I think this is really important, is that what TFA sort of represents, and the reason it's hiring the folks that it's hiring, and the reason that it exists, is to solve a very particular problem. Its goal is not to create a new branch of teachers because there's a shortage of teachers, though there surely are. It's to address a very serious and very particular challenge that's confronting our nation that, in my estimation, we've not done enough about going to solve. And so I think the people that are recruited by TFA and the people that do it tend to share sort of a social justice vision of what it means to be a citizen in this country and what it means to put your money where your mouth is on a daily basis. And I can think of no more fundamental, truer expression of that fight than going into a classroom every single day to kids who are forgotten about, to kids who are hungry, to kids who don't get what they need, and you try to fill every single void in their life. And you try to show them that all the things that you were blessed with at Center and all the wonderful experiences that you know that education can lead to literally exploring the four corners of the world and going to see India and all these wonderful things that I was fortunate enough to experience. That's what education can do. And so it's your job to show them that education can be the silver bullet for so many problems in their life. And that does seem extremely naive, and it is, and it was, but I also think it is the ideal that's worth fighting for. And that's what TFA essentially stands for, in my view, is it stands for the pursuit of social justice in a world that is crying out for social justice on a daily basis.
I feel like that's a good note to leave it on, unless anyone else has questions.
It's so weird. I'm sorry. I know we're all used to the Zoom life, but I'd be so much better if I could see these center people, so I could see my people and be like, hey, that's fine that you're hiding. I don't fault you for hiding. I like to hide too if I can. Today was the second day this week I wore actual adult pants because I had meetings, so there's no shame in it. But what I want to say is thank everyone for coming. I'm going to leave my contact information with Hannah and Molly. I think this is being recorded. Okay. So I could either just leave it in the chat, or you could use the Google and find me. But please reach out to me if you have sort of other questions that you don't want to raise in a group setting. It's totally fine. I'm happy to answer them very candidly as well. But obviously I believe in this program, otherwise I wouldn't have shown up today and badgered you with my life stories. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to talk people through some of these questions, even the more basic ones about interviewing and how to do that and what the process works with. I also want to give a shout out to our TFA folks that are here, Molly, Hannah, and Evan. Reach out to them as well if you have questions, if you want to understand deadlines and things like that. They're perfect people to get in touch with, and forming a relationship with them will be great for you if you're very serious about pursuing this and just learning more.